The other thing that's, I think, a little bit different than most accelerators is we're residential. So we have a lab and a co-working space, and our team and all the startups are there every day during the program. So what that means is the lessons learned from 4.5 years ago kind of build on each other over every single cohort. And as we stay in touch with companies in Series A and Series B, so like lessons learned and what works and what doesn't helps us inform for like a company 108 batches later. How do you think about approaching VCs, customers, and all that? So it's also kind of both kind of a brain trust, like this kind of brain that gets bigger over time as all the companies come together, and then also the way Y Combinator has like a huge community of entrepreneurs in software and IT and all that. Our goal, and I think likely probably have the biggest community of biotech founders. So hopefully people from batch 1 will mentor people from batch 9, and there'll be vice versa as well. So a lot of people who've been through the struggle together have knowledge that is overlapping as well, and can really create a bigger family as well.
Okay, so let's give them a round of applause before we take the questions. All right, so yeah, we want to open up the the floor for questions. Does anyone have any questions for the speakers? Yep.
So you have seen both kind of funders, the ones that come from academia and the ones that come from maybe working in the industry and having an idea. What are the advantages that each of that funders have while running a startup?
So I guess my first thought around coming from industry is probably they have more real-world experience of how the industry, assuming they want to found it within the same one, how it works. So there's some nuances behind the scenes of how things, and they have a network that might be established in a way, which is helpful. That experience can come with the flip side of maybe being somewhat regimented in a school of thought and a pattern of being, so you have to break that a little bit to then be able to kind of have the creativity of a startup. I would say one of the other disadvantages potentially from industry is maybe the amount of time. If they're working on their weekends, and their weeknights, it's great. It shows a lot of dedication. Do they have as much time accumulated into building a product or a technology as someone who spent 5 to 10 years in a PhD or postdoc? So in a PhD or postdoc, you have all this time to really dive into something. Whereas there, the disadvantage might be lack of experience in the business world. So there's a whole new skill set you have to learn. So I think both have to see. I think it's all comes back to being growth. Having a growth mindset. Be willing to jump into discomfort, but they kind of come from opposite angles, I think, in that way.
Yeah, so I think it's a very interesting question. I think that for us, like, the ideal is obviously like somebody who has spent a lot of time in academia, but also spent some time in industry. So it doesn't really answer your question, but what I was going to say is that I really agree with the idea that, when people stay, we see founders from both of them. We have a little bit of a preference for people who have like a real world experience, because a lot of people from academia, they, as I mentioned, they don't necessarily understand, if this idea can really be applied to the real world. But the thing with industry, it's great if there's experience, but what we also found is that people have been in industry for too long, like 20, 30 years. They're so set in a certain way of thinking and set in their ways that we have not seen as many successful companies come out of just founders that have been in industry for who knows how many years. Not that there aren't any, but I'm just saying that there's just this pattern that maybe, there's a reason why companies have, they're kind of set in their ways, and their way of innovating would be to acquire a startup or really like license an IP from somewhere else, because there's, I guess, a problem with innovation in those big companies, yeah. So.
Yes?
I'm more of a bone to pick with you guys.
Uh-oh.
No, it was like a comeback.
All the food puns, yeah. All the food puns.
No, so I guess 2 things. One is, you guys didn't really mention, you kind of peripherally mentioned carbon capture and sort of climate change, but what are your thoughts on waste and how much, whether food waste, agricultural waste? We have really backwards policy in the US with still continue to landfill and incinerate all of that. Do you see that space as adjacent or different to what you guys are doing? And then also in the, what you said kind of about the 0 to 1 founders, do you feel, I think you alluded to it right now, that you do see more value for a little bit more like industry experience, you understand like business models, but kind of to be contrarian, do you guys really see that, you know, 4 0 to 1 is the problem, or like to create systemic change? Is it really science, or is it, you know, that you need a different skill set for people to come in and build new systems of like behavior or business models and things like that? And I guess more for you, Alex, like, because you guys seem really focused on folks with research background, but is scientific innovation really the problem, or is it scaling across and disrupting systems?
I'll start with the easy one, which is like the food waste, and then I'll pass it on. So I love the food waste. It's something I should have mentioned earlier, but yes, it is. Yes, it is. You know, I went to part of the food waste conference last week. It was, you know, there's a lot of very, very interesting innovation that is happening there. And it's a huge market opportunity, right? I mean, I think it's like 30 to 40% of food is wasted. What are you going to do with it? I think insects kind of like gets into the food waste thing because they use, you know, food waste to grow insects. So that, yeah, there's some interesting things happening there. But we've seen more and more startups in the food waste. We haven't seen one that we're in love with yet, but it's talk to us. So yeah, so I think it's a huge opportunity. And then when it comes to climate change and really more generally the impact, so I think that at this point we haven't seen like a startup that really is going to do something that is going to go again, like it's going to pollute the world, right? It's something that is not even like it's not even a good strategy for anybody, right? It's all about like moving into something else. So their startups already have this inherent component about them. It's there. And when it comes to food and climate change, and are we thinking about ingredients that are going to come from food waste or ingredients that are going to be better for the environment? First of all, I think it's all interconnected, but I think that as you see food tech advancing, you start with like taste and price, and then you'll start seeing more innovations there. And as I mentioned, I think that a lot of people care more about value, so I think that's something that's definitely big, and I'm excited about, you know, the food waste opportunities, et cetera. And then the hard one.
Cool. I'll comment quickly on food waste. Totally down with food waste. We funded a bunch of companies, one turning food waste into hydrogen for fuel cells, a couple who are making like biomaterial, like bioplastics or leather out of food waste, filters for water.
Supply chain?
Huh?
Anyone doing the supply chain for these kinds of technologies?
Like management of food and preventing food waste?
Well, or even getting them the feedstock that they need at scale. Because that's why a lot of them don't get to market.
Oh, the companies that are using the food waste. We haven't, so that kind of infrastructure distribution type stuff, logistics, super important, I agree with. We don't really fund software very often unless it has, we've done a couple, but it's pretty rare. Yeah, really important and something that I think people need to be working on, probably more than they are. Climate change and food, a bunch of things, I won't ramble for long, so I won't say that. The last question was like on, could you repeat the last question on the contrarianism?
Yeah, well, so I guess what I was asking, maybe it's like more philosophical, which is, do you guys really see, like, I feel like even if you guys as incubators and accelerators didn't exist, there would still be like research and scientific innovation on like material science and new discoveries in terms of the science itself. But is that really what's preventing us from solving the zero to, like, I mean, aren't a lot of these things painkillers and not, what was it, painkillers?
No, they're vitamins
sorry,
and not
vitamins,
painkillers.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, right, where, what do you feel like, is science really what needs to improve, or the application of science to like create systemic change, or is it more like behavior management, and how do you, like, what is your theory of change to have systemic change versus just like, okay, here's a new technology that solves like another 2% of the problem, right?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the biggest one is like behavior change is really, really difficult. I think if we put it in food systems in places where there's a big lever that relates to food quality and climate, it would be in soil, actually in soil management and agriculture, because you can put a shit ton of carbon back in the soil and make our food more nutrient rich and healthier, probably reduce use of pesticides. And that would be, I think there are marketplaces coming around for that to incentivize farmers. I think it's amazing and huge. People doing innovation on soil amendments and microbial fertilizers, all that. That needs to be regulation, carbon tax, carbon credits.
Waste management too.
For sure, yeah. I'm a fan of that too.
Well, in terms of where you can apply behavior change levers,
Yeah, I think that's a big one. I mean, I think we talk about a lot and drives a lot of our investing around behavior changes. People are paying with their wallet, they're voting with their wallet, essentially. So that is driving a huge amount. But in terms of innovation versus like, I think really big innovation drives new business models a lot. So I think that's where, why we're investing in really, really hard science. Because when it comes to how we've created food, it really hasn't changed very much in the last 10,000 years, or there's been pretty minor adjustments. So even if, say, making meat in a bioreactor was technologically feasible, we could squeeze into these bioreactors, but it was not any more energy efficient than what we do now, I think it would still be a huge win, because then you'd reclaim a huge amount of land that you could use for forestry, other use in agriculture, so it'd be really beneficial. So the new technology, I think, will drive changes in society and how industries are built, which will then change business models. Don't know if that answered your question. Need longer to riff on it.
Yeah, I have something to add. So I think it's very interesting to think about the fact that I think most people are getting more and more aware about climate change. They're getting more aware about the impact of like animal agriculture on a lot of different things, sustainability, etc. People are aware of the problem. I think public awareness has increased, but it's so hard to get people to do something about it. And this is really, I mean, Josh Tetrick, who I mentioned earlier, who started Just, that does, they have like a replacement for egg products, they have a replacement for mayo, they have a replacement, and now they're also working, I think, in cellular agriculture as well. So what he's saying is that those products, in theory, are not needed, right? It's not like people, like, we don't need cultivated meat in society. It's just that people just like want to reduce their meat consumption, and meat consumption is like going up all over the world, with dairy products, etc., etc. So at the end of the day, people, yes, a lot of people do care about values, but at the end of the day, it's going to be around like cost, convenience, and taste. So really, these are the things that really need to be nailed. And yes, behavioral changes are important, and yes, people care more and more about labels. This one is like, GMO. This one is gluten-free or something, pesticide-free, etc. But still, if there are eggs that cost like $10 or eggs that cost $1, most people will go for the $1. So behavioral is sometimes a little tough, because it's also, these products are expensive and people may not necessarily care as much as we would love them to.
I think consumers can make a really, really massive difference when they buy different products. And the kind of canary in the coal mine is dairy, going from cow milk to nut milk and all these other alternatives, and then that leading to a bunch of the ripple effects of that are really, really big. And I think that goes to cheese and then other products for age. And from the conversations we have with most like the biggest food companies in the world, like they know that there's a tidal shift that has happened and it's just going to continue happening. So I think the choices people make in the grocery store are having a bigger impact than people actually realize. And it goes to like the very, very top of these companies. Like they are all thinking about it and trying to figure it out, whether it's like plastic and waste, whether it's which food they have, or the ingredients, whether colorants, preservatives, all of that, to the core ingredient. So I think consumer behavior change is just a bigger driver than people realize, actually.
Any other questions? Oh, okay.
So in terms of like the companies you guys have invested in, companies have invested in, have any of them that are food-based in particular had any like legal issues getting into the market, where maybe lobbyist regulations and stuff are kind of preventing them from going that step further?
I think you alluded to it before. Right now, regulations have not been written for cell-based meat. So there's a number of companies that have kind of created their own lobby to go into Washington and work with regulators on writing that. So that is going to be ongoing, and probably the battle will heat up between them and like traditional meat producing lobby. That is a big one. I think I haven't seen any others that have been blocked yet. I'm wondering when it comes to, again, going back to modifying crops into being able to tolerate more arid, less, more drought conditions. People at Salk Institute in San Diego are working on modifying a bunch of our main row crops to have more robust root structures that would keep more carbon in the soil, actually. So they create more suberin, which is a cork-like material. And adoption of that is also like, then you have to go through USDA and public perception. So it hasn't blocked anything yet. I think that it is a lot of companies aren't yet home free though.
Yeah, and just something to add, like there's right now, yes, there's I think the industry is really getting really scared about what's happening with plant-based and cell agriculture. And because of everything that's happening right now, even the old ones are getting punished for what's happening right now, even though nobody really cared about people calling, veggie burger a while ago. And now, for example, in Europe, I think it's hilarious. There's a regulation now, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's like they want to call burgers veggie discs. And veggie sausages are going to be veggie tubes. So, very tasty.
So tasty.
Yeah, and these things have been there forever, and now, it's kind of the industry getting into it. It's kind of interesting because we also mentioned GFI, and it's going to be, they're right now fighting in court, and it's probably going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. It's about, freedom of speech. Are you allowed to call something a veggie burger, or a veggie meat, or plant-based meat? And so plant-based meat, they define it as being something that you're allowed to say because it's freedom of expression. Then when it comes to the actual word meat, it's a little bit more complicated. But countries from, for example, if you go to France where I'm from, like you wouldn't see like soy milk. You never, like there's no soy milk, it's soy beverage. Or in the UK, I don't know if you're from the UK, but it's soy milk with a Y.
So we used to have, it used to say milk and stuff, but a lot of the companies now have dropped it to just beverage or drink.
Yeah.
Or the MYLK instead of spelling.
Yeah, I mean, I find it kind of funny because the lobbyists and regulators are saying that it's all about protecting the consumers because like we don't want them to be confused.
Yeah, I mean, I understand.
And it's funny, right? Like nobody has really like bought something and be like, oh my god, I was so confused that this was like soy, So and what's really interesting is if you look at the regulators who are trying to pass this legislation, so they're all coming from states that are meat producers or dairy producers. Right now, there's the Dairy Act, the Dairy Pride Act that's from Wisconsin, which is one of the biggest producers. So it's not about really protecting consumers; it's kind of protecting some interests. So yeah.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that's a really interesting point. And I think it goes to reflect a bit of like, in the long term, you can't trick consumers and thinking people are that stupid. And it shows like when big companies are acquiring small companies, like Nestle does not want their logo to be up front. They want to keep that same brand and like hide Nestle or the other big company as much as they can because they actually command a higher price point if they don't show like their product and logo front and center. So I think it goes to like, across every big company, like the value of the brand is plummeting a lot, and these things are only going to compound that. So I think it's like a short-term kind of grasping for air type of thing that in the long term will probably be not beneficial. I hope, unless they win, and then we're out of a bunch of companies. But hopefully not. So.
Last question.
This is similar to her question, but like in software, when you look at the history of like lots of consumer products, they're sort of driven by these fundamental innovations. So, like iPhones give you like location products, which gives you Uber, and it's like 4G will give you Snapchat, and like AWS gives you the cloud, gives you Slack. Is that like so much? You mentioned how the cultured meat stuff, sort of like, especially in the last like few years, like absolutely skyrocketed. Were there like a few fundamental technical innovations that people figured out, like, oh wait, I can do X, Y, and Z, and then everything started being created? Or to what degree are those sort of, are they driven by fundamental advances in biology?
I'm thinking of the early ones. I mean, that all came out of stem cell work in regenerative medicine labs in medicine, which still has a long way to go to like really is transformative in human health. So I think it came out of a kind of people applying one technology in a different place, and now we're going to see a bunch of, now that we have a huge market opportunity and a bunch of investment and all that, we're going to see people probably try and drive a lot of fundamental innovation, but taking technology that was suited for pharma and for really expensive, like N of 1 type medicine, to very broad types of things. So technology you need to make meat on a scale you can feed 10 billion people is very different than making a cell therapy for a population of 10,000 patients or something small. So I think we're still on the verge of a lot of technical innovation there that will actually change, is necessary 100% to change that whole both the growing meat inside the bioreactor and also the infrastructure to be much, much more efficient.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I should also, I think another component, I mean, I agree with that really we still need a lot of technological things, and a lot of them have been pushed by this. But I like to think about really would Impossible Burger would have succeeded like 30 years ago, even if the technology was there. And I'm not sure, you know, it's like, I think that it's really, it comes with the message, it comes with other things that right now people are more willing to accept. There've been, I mean, I don't eat meat, but there've been like great products on the market for a long time. And for some reason, like they've failed to convince in the past, and people were looking at them as just veggie products. And now we're moving to a different, you know, different things right now. We call them plant-based. It's very interesting. For example, there are sausages from Life that used to have been buying for years, and they used to say veggie sausages, and now they say plant-based. So I think a lot of it is also around marketing, it's around public acceptance and what's covered in the media. So I think it's both technological advances and also society's a little bit. Yeah.
That was the last. Okay. Do you want? Was it a quick one?
Yes, a quick one. How do you see cultured meat being differentiated as a segment from plant-based meat? Because with the plant-based proposition, you're targeting vegetarians, vegans, potentially people who didn't eat meat. But then you take cultured meat, and I could see that sort of being no man's land. Would be interested to hear your perspective on how is that a unique segment.
Yeah, so I'm going to start by just correcting one aspect. You said that the plant-based stuff is mostly for vegetarian and vegans. Like, not anymore. It used to be. Now it's all about flexitarians, like really convincing people who want their meat to like be bloody, right? That's why they added like beet juice, or they wanted to like sizzle and all this. But then, sorry, I'm like tired already. What was that? Yeah, then it was, plant-based versus cultured meat. So sorry. And then, so there's this really interesting analysis by AgFunder that really showed how they viewed the meat market in the next, I think, up to 2040 or 2050. And the way they view it is that at first it's going to be plant-based, it's going to really start eating up the market. And then it's cultured meat that's going to eat up both plant-based and regular meat. So if cultured meat was a thing, I wonder how plant-based will survive later on. They would have to differentiate and have a different value proposition or something else. Yeah, I don't know, Jeff.
I think that's a good point. What I would say the marketing of cultured meat is, the goal is to not have any marketing. I would say essentially, like, imagine for most meat eaters, like where I mostly grew up in Iowa, where there's ground beef and like huge amounts of meat. If you can solve all the technological hurdles, and someone's going to a grocery store and they're just fundamentally looking at a package of cultured ground beef and non-cultured ground beef, and they know their neighbors have tried it, they know there's no antibiotics in there, they know it's maybe less land, land and energy intensive. What does it take for them to try it one time, to pick it up one time? I think that's kind of the question. That will be on also cultured meat companies being very, very good about transparency and safety. So being very clear around how they talk to consumers, how the FDA regulates them. One of the ideas from the very beginning is that you can go tour a place where you make your meat. The same way you go to a brewery and go see that. You probably are not going to do that at a slaughterhouse right now. If you are, you'll probably turn vegetarian from everything I've heard. So I mean, the goal is always to be around make something that's as good, if not better, at price parity. And then at the same time, like if we think about it in reality, like everything is talking about making beef equivalent. You can create something that's different. You could mix two different. You could make chicken and beef mix. You could make. There's people in Australia I've talked to who are making kangaroo meat, as well as other exotic animals. Thinking about blending cells with fish. If you don't even have to do genetic modification. If you put them in slightly different conditions, the omega-3 versus omega-6 expression changes and the nutritional profile will change. So thinking of a future where meat has an actual, like when we talk about food as medicine, like when you can create the meat and food as you want, then you can also do that in a much more detailed level, which has then an added benefit to people alongside just being as good.
All right, guys. I think that wraps it up. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think now you can just, this is for you guys to meet each other. It's networking, and then you guys can check out some products. Actually, Hitomi, do you want to talk about your product?
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Hitomi, founder of Colorido. My product is there, so looks Play-Doh. It's an edible Play-Doh. Its ingredient is all plant-based ingredients, and the colored with natural food coloring. So make your favorite shape and bake it in the oven 10 minutes and ready to eat delicious cookie. And I'm mom of 4 kids. I was a cooking instructor in Tokyo for over 10 years, and I registered my company in this May, but so I just started forcing in October because of my husband really strong against me. So yeah, I always support his business. But so the last in September, so we had a big fight and I win. So so that's why today so my husband cooked dinner and so care of my kids, and I can hear so that I just did it the first thing in October. So but so I have to any support investor and any support. So I have a Japanese network. So I have some Japanese food maker. I know some social media marketing companies. So but there's in Japan. So I need to start here because the California brand is very super cool for Japanese. So maybe so other country also. So that's why. So please any help and so yeah, please let me know. So any contact me. Thank you.
I actually think it's an amazing product for anyone with kids or anyone with sisters or brothers, or like I have a sister who has a kid, and I have friends actually now who have a lot of babies. So I just think like it's a really cool interactive product, that you can eat at the same time after playing with it. Yeah, and then Super U and Airy are my products. Super U comes from my background in triathlon and I guess you could say just very endurance sports. I did Ironmans and half Ironmans, and I just wanted a lot of like plant protein based spreads that I could consume on the go. So like for people who are into outdoorsy activities as well, or just you just need to eat when you're doing other things, that's kind of what it's for. And then Airy products are CBD based products. It's 0 THC. There's a lot of confusion between THC and CBD. CBD does not give you any of the like psychoactive like effects. You don't feel high. What I use it for is just productivity. I lead a very stressful life, and it allows me to just like power through a lot of work. There's a lot of stress, but I feel like none of the stress inside. I feel just like really calm, and that's what I use it for. So you guys can check it out. And thanks so much. I think I have another event tomorrow, actually. It's blockchain self-sovereign identity. If you're interested, let me know and I can share event details. But thank you so much for coming.
I don't know how it applies.
it is pretty clear that like, when you go through the list of like things that became popular, like
I feel like they just put too much in. Something like blend the latte to like mix it up. It just gives it that really not for me.
Can you taste it? Sort of like, no, right?
No, I think first time I had it, I feel like I did because it was like a placebo, like because I knew it was in it. I felt like I was trying to feel something different.
Yes, we were just looking at.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So yeah. They don't think that dive enough.